The sky over planet Garnix was always dark. Thick clouds of smoke and ash covered the sun, and the air smelled like metal and fire. In the center of a rocky valley, a group of alien raiders had built a base using scraps of metal and stolen machines. This was not a friendly place. It was a prison for many, but for one human girl named Mira, it was a nightmare. Mira sat inside a small cage made of iron bars. The cage was barely large enough for her to sit up straight. Her clothes were torn, and her hands were tied, but her eyes still burned with courage. She had been taken from a transport ship 2 weeks ago by the raiders. Since then, they had done everything they could to break her spirit. They shouted at her, threw cold water on her, called her weak. But she never begged, not once. From the trees outside the camp, a pair of golden eyes watched everything. A large creature, covered in dark scales that shimmered in the dim light, sat hidden behind the thick leaves. His name was Threx. He was part of an ancient species, one the galaxy had forgotten, giant dragon-like beast who once lived freely across the stars. Now, Threx was the last of his kind. He had lived alone for more than 100 years, choosing to stay far from the wars and greed of other beings. But something about the girl caught his attention. He had seen many prisoners over the years. Most were broken after a few days, but not this girl. Mira did not cry. She did not scream. She stared at her captors with calm strength, even when they laughed at her or tried to scare her. It reminded Threx of his own kind, how they had faced their enemies long ago. Inside the camp, the leader of the raiders, a tall alien with blue skin named Crawl, stood near Mira's cage. "You humans think you're special," Crawl said with a cold smile. "But look at you now, all alone." Mira didn't answer. Crawl leaned closer. "Tomorrow, we'll show the others what happens to those who don't obey. You'll be the example." Still, Mira said nothing. She just looked at him without fear. Threx narrowed his eyes. He could hear every word. His sharp hearing picked up the cruel tone in Kroll's voice, the way the others laughed and clapped at the idea of a public punishment. They didn't see her as a person, just a message, a thing to break. He felt something stir inside him. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in years, anger. But more than anger, it was something else, a connection, a memory. Long ago, Threx had watched his own kin be taken by invaders. They were locked up, chained, treated like monsters. He had escaped that day, but the guilt had followed him all his life. Now, he watched Mira and felt that same guilt rising again. As the raiders walked away from her cage, laughing and celebrating their victory, Mira leaned back against the bars. Her hands were shaking, but her face stayed strong. Then, quietly, she began to hum a song. It was soft, almost a whisper. Threx's ears twitched. The tune was familiar. It was not a human song. It was one his own people used to sing around fire pits under starlit skies. It was a song of hope, a song of home. How did this girl know it? He stepped back, hidden by the trees, but he kept watching. The wind picked up. The torches around the camp flickered. None of the raiders noticed the quiet presence in the forest. None of them saw the glowing eyes watching from the dark. But Mira did, for a brief second. She looked toward the trees. Her eyes locked onto Threx's. She didn't scream. She didn't look away. Threx felt it clearly now. A message passed between them without words. "I see you," her eyes said, "and I'm not afraid." The stars began to fade as night took over the sky. The camp grew quieter. The raiders went to their tents, leaving only a few guards at the edge. Mira lay on the cold floor of her cage, her eyes still open, staring at the sky. Threx stayed in the trees, unmoving, like a statue. Something had changed inside him. He had stayed hidden all these years to protect himself. But now, watching this small human face cruelty without fear, he felt shame. He was powerful. He was ancient, and yet he had done nothing. Not anymore. He took one step forward, his clawed foot pressing gently against the earth. Then another. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know what it meant to protect a human. But he had already made his choice. The night passed slowly on planet Garnix. Cold winds moved across the dark rocks. and the broken machines around the raider camp groaned softly in the wind. Mira stayed awake inside her cage. She didn't feel pain anymore, only a quiet calm. She had seen something in the forest, a creature, a pair of golden eyes. She was not sure if it was real, but something in her heart told her it was. High in the trees, Threx watched her. He had not moved since she looked at him. The song she hummed still echoed in his mind. It was not exactly the same as the one he remembered, but it held the same feeling: peace, sadness, hope. Threx was not used to such emotions anymore. For many years, he had hidden from war, from noise, from people. He had become a shadow in the forest, but now the fire inside him had returned. In the early morning, the camp began to wake. Raiders came out of their tents, eating and talking loudly. Some laughed about what would happen to Mira later that day. She would be put on display, forced to kneel before the crowd as they mocked her. It was their way of showing power. Mira listened from her cage, but she did not react. She sat quietly, hands still tied, her eyes focused on the forest. Threx remained hidden, but his body was tense. He was waiting, watching. Then something happened that made Mira sit up straight. Two young raiders walked toward her cage. They carried a bucket of water and a metal rod. One of them smirked. Time to clean up the little guest. He said, "The chief wants her looking alive." The other one laughed and opened the cage. Mira didn't move. "Stand up," the first raider ordered. Mira stood slowly. They poured cold water over her head. It soaked her hair and shirt. She shivered but did not say a word. Then, with the metal rod, they pushed her back and forth, not to hurt her, but to humiliate her. They called her weak, small, useless. Threx's claws dug into the tree branch she sat on. He had seen enough. His heart beat faster. His breath grew heavier. But still, he did not move. Not yet. Mira looked up at the sky, her face wet and cold, and whispered softly, "Not today." The raiders didn't understand her words. They just laughed and left. Threx did understand. He had watched many cruel acts over the years, but something about Mira's strength and silence moved him deeply. She did not fight with fists. She fought with her will, and in her silence. He heard a voice louder than any scream. As the sun rose higher, the camp grew more active. Raiders began setting up the central square. A large metal pole stood in the middle. That's where they would tie Mira for the lesson. But something else was happening too. Guards began to disappear. One was checking the power line at the edge of the camp. He didn't return. Another was walking the fence near the forest. He vanished without a sound. The camp didn't notice right away. There was too much noise, too many people moving. But Threx was already inside, moving like a shadow, silent, fast, controlled. He didn't attack with rage. He moved with purpose. He knew he could not save Mira by only watching. He had to prepare. And he had 15 minutes before they would come for her. He used every second. In the cage. Mira sat again, watching quietly. She could feel something had changed. The air felt different. The wind carried a strange sound like wings moving through smoke. Then she heard a soft whisper behind her. Not a voice, but a sound like wind moving through trees. She turned slowly and saw them again, those golden eyes. This time, they were closer. Threx stood just behind the wall, half hidden by shadow. For the first time, Mira saw his full shape, a tall, powerful creature with scales that looked like armor and wings. Folded tightly against his back, she didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared. Threx looked at her. No words were needed. He raised one claw slowly and placed it against the bars of her cage. Mira, still tied, moved forward and rested her fingers on the same spot, touching the cold metal. To beings from different worlds. One a forgotten dragon beast, the other a young human girl. Yet, in that moment, they shared something rare: trust. Threx lowered his head, then stepped back into the shadows. He would return. Soon. Mira sat up straighter. In the distance, the raiders were calling for her. It was time. 3 of them came with weapons, laughing as they approached the cage. "Time for the show," one of them said. "Let's take our little star to the stage." They opened the cage and pulled Mira out roughly. But something strange happened. the sky, which had been clear, suddenly darkened. A cloud passed overhead, but it moved too fast, too low. The air grew thick. Silent. One of the guards stopped walking. "Did you hear that?" The other frowned. "No." "What?" Then came a sound none of them could ignore. A roar, not loud, but deep, like thunder under the ground. The guards looked around, confused. Mira smiled, just a little. She knew. He was coming. The three guards pulled Mira toward the center of the camp. She didn't fight. Her hands were still tied, and her steps were slow, but her head was high. Her eyes were steady. Round them, other raiders gathered. They stood in a half-circle around a metal pole. Some clapped, some laughed. A few picked up stones to throw. All of them believed this was going to be a show. But none of them noticed that two more guards were missing. None of them noticed that the air had changed. It was heavier, still, like the moment before a storm. Mira noticed, and she was not afraid. As they reached the pole, one of the guards turned her round and began tying her hands behind it. "You'll stand here until the chief says stop." He said, "Don't worry, we won't hurt you too badly, just enough to remind others not to disobey." Mira said nothing. Her heart was beating fast, but not from fear. She could feel it. He was close. High above, on the rocky cliffs overlooking the camp, Threx stood still as a statue. His wings were spread wide, catching the wind. The sun behind him made his scales glow faintly. He looked down at the raiders below. He had seen enough. He had waited 15 minutes. Now it was time. Threx jumped. He fell fast, like a dark shadow, cutting through the sky. In seconds, he landed just outside the camp, his massive body shaking the ground. Dust rose in the air. His golden eyes lit up like fire. The nearest guard turned and froze. He opened his mouth to shout, but no sound came. With one powerful swing of his tail, Threx struck the guard across the chest. The alien flew back and crashed into a metal wall with a loud clang. The others stared in shock. "What is that?" Someone screamed. It came from the forest. "Get the weapons." But it was already too late. Threx was in the camp now, his wings folding and his claws digging into the ground. He moved like a storm, fast and unstoppable. He leapt toward a group of raiders, knocking them down with a single swipe of his claws. Mira turned her head as much as she could. She saw him, her eyes wide not in fear, but in awe. He was real, and he had come for her. Some of the braver raiders began firing energy blasters. Blue and green beams shot toward Threx, but they bounced off his scales like rain off stone. He roared a deep, powerful sound that echoed across the valley. Threx wasn't wild. He was focused. Every move had purpose. He didn't attack Mira. He didn't damage the cage. He only struck those who had caused harm. More raiders tried to escape. Threx spread his wings and beat them, once sending a strong wind across the camp. That knocked down tents and machines. Crawl, the tall alien leader, finally stepped out from his command post. He saw his camp in ruins, his warriors running, and in the center, a massive beast protecting the girl. "This can't be real," Crawl said. Stepping back, Threx turned his eyes to him. Crawl grabbed a large blaster from the wall and aimed it. "You think I'll be scared of some wild creature?" Threx stepped forward, slow and steady. Crawl fired. The shot hit Threx's shoulder and made him flinch slightly, but it didn't stop him. Threx growled low and moved faster now. He ran straight at Crawl. The alien tried to shoot again, but Threx was quicker. He slammed into him with his shoulder, knocking the blaster out of his hands. Crawl fell to the ground, stunned. Threx stood over him, his chest rising and falling. He looked down at the alien who had smiled while hurting Mira. But Threx didn't attack, not yet. He turned and walked back toward the pole. Mira was still tied there, breathing hard. She was covered in dust, her face pale, but her eyes were shining. Threx gently raised one claw and sliced through the ropes with care. Mira fell forward slightly, weak from standing so long. Threx caught her with his other claw and slowly lowered her to the ground. Mira touched the earth with her hands. She looked up at Threx, and their eyes met again. "Thank you," she whispered. Threx did not speak. but he gave a small nod. Behind them, some raiders tried to regroup, but the fear had already spread. Their machines were broken. Their leaders were gone. Their pride was crushed. Mira stood slowly and looked around. Leave, she said clearly. The few remaining raiders stared at her. She pointed at the edge of the camp. Go. Now. No one questioned her. They ran. Crawl, still on the ground, looked up in disbelief. You control it? Mira walked past him, and Threx followed. I didn't control him, she said quietly. He chose. Crawl lay still. As they disappeared into the forest. High in the cliffs, above the ruined camp, Mira and Threx stopped to rest. The wind blew softly, and for the first time in days, Mira breathed clean air. She sat beside Threx, leaning against his warm side. Why did you help me? She asked. Threx looked at her. There was no voice, but Mira somehow understood. Because I saw myself in you. They sat in silence, watching the broken camp below, a place where fear once ruled. But now, the world had changed, and it all began 15 minutes after a dragon opened his eyes. The sun was setting over planet Garnix. The sky, once full of smoke and dust, now showed a bit of red light. The camp where Mira was held had fallen silent. No more shouting. No more cruel laughter. Only broken machines, scattered weapons, and empty tents remained. On a high cliff just beyond the camp, Threx stood still like a mountain. His wings folded behind him. His golden eyes watched the valley below. The wind blew across his dark scales, making them shimmer in the fading light. Beside him sat Mira. Her clothes were dusty, and her face had a small cut on her cheek. But her eyes were full of strength. She hugged her knees and looked out at them. Whirled with quiet thought, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, for a while. They simply sat there, sharing the silence. Then, Mira asked in a soft voice, will they come back? Threx turned his head toward her. His deep eyes blinked slowly. They will try, Mira said, answering her own question. Raiders don't give up easily. Threx lowered his head slightly and let out a slow breath. A warm wind moved through the grass around them. It was not a sound of fear, it was a promise. If they returned, he would be ready. Mira smiled a little. You stayed, she whispered. She didn't fully understand why this ancient creature had saved her. There were so many others who had looked the other way, ignored her, or ran. But he didn't. He came out of hiding. He fought for her. And now, he stayed beside her. Mira stood up and looked down at the ruined camp. Others are still out there, she said. People like me. Maybe worse off. Threx raised his head. I can't leave them, she continued, if I walk away. Now, I'll be just like them, the ones who watched and did nothing. The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew that feeling too well. He took a step forward and lowered his wings gently. Mira looked at him in surprise. You come with me? Threx bowed his head once together. They began walking down the hill, one small girl and one massive beast, side by side. Over the next few days, Mira and Threx moved across the rocky lands of Garnix. They followed broken roads, old paths, and the signals of distress left behind by others. Threx flew at night when it was safer, and Mira rode between his shoulders, her hands gripping the soft scales behind his neck. She learned that Threx was not just strong, he was wise. He could smell danger before it came. He could feel vibrations in the ground from far away. He always knew where to go, even when the sky was dark. They found the first group of prisoners in an old mining station. For humans and to small alien children were locked in a large metal cage. The guards had left after hearing rumors of a flying beast destroying camps. Mira opened the cage while Threx stood guard. The rescued people were scared at first. Some even tried to hide from the dragon. But Mira spoke calmly. He's not here to harm you, she said. He's here to protect you. Slowly, the fear faded. Threx sat still as the children came closer. One of them reached out and touched his foot. Threx didn't move. He just looked at the child with quiet eyes. From that moment, the stories began to spread. People whispered about a girl and a dragon traveling the land, breaking cages, fighting slavers, and helping the helpless. They called her the Flame Walker. They called him the Sky Fire. Together, they were called the Girl and the Flame. Mira didn't ask for a title. She only wanted to do what was right. But the more people they helped, the more the legend grew. Soon, the raiders began to fear the sound of wings. When they saw red clouds in the sky, they would run. They would shout warnings. He's coming. The beast is here. Protect. The girl, she's the one he follows. But Threx did not follow her. He walked beside her. One night, they stopped to rest in a quiet valley with tall grass and clean air. A small campfire crackled between them. Mira held a warm drink given by a grateful village they had helped earlier that day. You know, she said, staring at the fire. I used to think no one cared, that no one would ever come to help someone like me. Threx listened, his head resting on his claws. I thought I was alone, she continued, but then you appeared. The dragon let out a low rumble, not angry, not loud, just a sound of peace. Mira looked up at the stars. Maybe we were both alone, she whispered, and maybe we found each other at the right time. Threx lifted his head and looked at the stars too. He had lived for hundreds of years. He had seen wars, fire, and silence. But this was something different. A girl with a strong heart. A world that still had hope. A future that had changed. The wind picked up gently. The fire danced. And high above them, the sky turned red, not from smoke or fire, but from the setting sun. Glowing bright behind the clouds, it looked like wings, spread wide across the sky. Mira smiled. So that's what it feels like, she said, when the world starts to heal. For 2 weeks, Mira and Threx traveled across the wild lands of Garnix. Wherever they went, people came out of hiding. Cages were broken. Camps were destroyed. Raiders ran from the sound of wings. In the sky, the people now believed the legends. They whispered, the beast protects the girl. They said, she walks with fire. And most important of all, they said, there's hope again. But far away, high in the Blackstone Mountains, the old leaders of the raider clans had gathered. They were not happy. Inside a cold stone fortress, 8 alien commanders sat around a burning table. Each one had scars, weapons, and many battles behind them. But today, they were nervous. Crawl, the raider chief Mira had faced weeks ago, stood before them with a bandage across his chest. You saw it with your own eyes? One commander asked. Yes, Crawl said. It was massive. Black scales, golden eyes, wings wider than a ship, and it fought like nothing I've ever seen. It followed the girl? No, Crawl replied. It walked beside her. Silence fell over the room. Then one of the commanders stood up. Send the fleet, all of it. Find the girl. Find the beast. And this before their story spreads any further. Meanwhile, Mira and Threx stopped in a small village built on the edge of a dry river. The people there had never seen a dragon before, but they welcomed them with open arms. They offered food, water, and rest. Mira sat near the riverbed, looking at the stars. Threx lay beside her, silent and watchful. I wonder what you were like before. Mira said, her voice soft. Before you hid in the forest, before the world forgot your kind. Threx didn't answer, but he slowly turned his head toward her. Mira continued, you're not just strong, you're kind. I can feel it. She looked at him and smiled. You could have stayed hidden forever, but you came out to save one girl in a cage. Why? Threx's golden eyes stared into hers. The firelight danced in his reflection. Then, slowly, carefully, Threx touched his forehead to her shoulder. Mira froze. The touch was gentle, full of warmth. In Threx's world, this was an ancient sign, a bond, a choice. He had lived alone for many years, but now he had chosen someone to protect, not just for one battle but for life. Mira placed her hand on his head and whispered, I choose you too. The next morning, danger came. It started with a loud hum in the sky. People looked up and saw dark shapes flying fast. Ships, small and sharp, painted with the red mark of the raider fleet. One of the villagers shouted, they found us. Panic filled the village. Parents grabbed their children. Elders tried to hide. People screamed. Mira and Threx stood together at the center of town. She looked up at the sky. It's too soon. She said, we're not ready. Threx let out. a low growl, and spread his wings. No, Mira said quickly. Not yet. They're looking for me. If I go with them, maybe they'll leave the village alone. Threx turned his head sharply. He growled again louder this time. I'm not saying I'm giving up, she said. I'm saying we need a plan. The ships landed just outside the village. Soldiers in dark armor stepped out, weapons in hand. They marched forward in silence. Forming a wall, a voice shouted through a speaker, surrender the girl, or we take the village. Mira stepped forward. I'm here, she shouted, but you'll have to go through him first. The soldiers turned their eyes toward the massive dragon beside her. Threx roared. The sound shook the ground. It echoed through the hills. Birds flew from trees. Stones rolled down from cliffs. The soldiers hesitated. Then their leader raised a hand and shouted, attack. Blasters fired. Energy bolts lit up the sky. But Threx was faster. He pushed Mira behind him and leapt into the air. With one great beat of his wings, he flew over the front line and landed with a crash in the middle of the soldiers. His claws swept through the weapons. His tail knocked down machines. His wings blocked the blast from reaching the village. Mira ran to help, using her small blade to cut a few wires on a drop raider rifle. Sparks flew, and one of the attackers fell back. The villagers, seeing her bravery and Threx's power, began to fight too. They picked up sticks, tools, anything they joined the battle to protect their home. Threx fought with the strength of 10 creatures, but even he was getting tired. There were too many enemies. Then Mira climbed onto his back. Let's finish this together, she said. Threx beat his wings and rose into the air. Mira held on tightly from above. She could see the whole village. The raiders were pushing forward. Again, now, she shouted. Threx dived like a falling star. Fire burned across his back, his old power awakening. He landed in front of the enemy with a thunderous crash, shaking the earth. Dust flew. Light blazed. The sky turned red again. The raiders dropped their weapons and began to run. The village cheered. Mira slid down from Threx's back and stood beside him, breathless. The leader of the soldiers looked at her, shaking. Who are you? He asked. Mira looked at Threx, then back at the soldier. We're not here to destroy, she said. We're here to stop those who do. Threx stepped forward and let out one last roar. The soldier ran. That night, the village lit candles for safety. People danced, sang, and shared food with Mira and Threx. One old woman came up to Mira and said, You are more than a girl now. You are a symbol. Mira looked at Threx, resting peacefully near the fire. I'm not alone anymore, she said. That's what makes me strong. The sky over Garnix was quiet after the battle. The raider ships were gone. The village was safe. But something had changed that day, something bigger than a single fight. News of the dragon and the girl spread across the planet like wildfire. People no longer whispered, they spoke with pride. She walks beside the flame. She stands when others kneel. She is not alone. They came from the forests, the mines, the ruined towns, survivors, workers, old soldiers. Even small groups of aliens who had once feared humans, now they came to join her. They wanted to help Mira. They wanted to follow Threx. And so, a new camp was built. Not a prison camp, not a raider camp, but a place of protection, a place of hope. At the center stood a tall stone pillar. Mira carved a single symbol on it, a dragon wing wrapped around a rising sun. That symbol became a sign of change. Mira walked through the camp one evening, checking on new arrivals. People worked together, sharing food, tools, and stories. Children played beside the watchtowers. A group of mechanics were repairing an old radio system to send messages across the planet. It felt alive. Still, Mira knew it wouldn't last if they didn't prepare. She found Threx resting near the edge of camp. His wings were folded, his body still. But his eyes followed her as she approached. We'll need defenses, Mira said, and leaders for each group. We can't wait for the next attack. Threx nodded slowly, then raised his head and looked at the hills beyond. You think they'll strike again soon? Threx didn't answer with words, but Mira had learned to read his silence. Yes, she said. So do I. She sat beside him and took a deep breath. "Do you ever feel tired? Tired of fighting?" Threx shifted his head slightly, then let out a low, quiet breath. It wasn't a sigh. It was more like understanding. "We don't fight because we like it," Mira said. "We fight because we have to." Threx gently lowered his head beside her, his eyes closing for a moment of rest. 3 days later, the radio tower came to life. Voice came through broken but clear enough. "This is Station Solon. We heard of the girl and the beast. We want to help sending small team." The people around the tower cheered. For the first time, they weren't alone in the fight. When the team from Station Solon arrived, they brought old maps, a small shuttle, and a surprise a human pilot named Bren, and a three-eyed alien engineer named Fiven. Both had escaped the raiders months ago and had been in hiding. They had heard the stories. "We thought they were just legends," Bren said to Mira, looking at Threx with wide eyes. "But you're real." Mira smiled. "Very real." Fiven stepped forward. "Your movement is growing. But if the raiders send their full fleet next time, we won't survive with sticks and stones." Mira nodded. "We need to hit back before they regroup. If we wait too long, they'll crush every camp like this one." Bren placed a hand on the shuttle map. "There's a fuel station under their control not far from here. It powers 2 of their major zones." Fiven added, "If we take it, they'll feel it. It'll send a message." Mira looked at Threx. "What do you think?" Threx rose to his feet, wings spreading slightly. His body was calm, but his eyes were sharp-eyed. It was time. The mission was not easy. Mira took a small team: Bren, Fiven, 3 trained volunteers, and of course, Threx. They traveled under the cover of night, following the path of an old canyon. When they reached the fuel station, it was guarded by heavy machines and watchtowers. Mira studied the base from a cliff with the others. Too many guards. One of the volunteers whispered. "Not for him," Mira said, pointing to Threx. He flew silently through the dark sky, his black wings blending with the night. He landed behind the station and moved without a sound. One by one, he removed the guards on the far side, giving Mira and the team a way in. Fiven hacked the doors. Bren covered the entrance. Mira moved like she had done it all her life, quiet, focused, brave. Inside, they placed charges near the main fuel lines and power grid. 10 minutes until overload, Fiven said. But just as they turned to leave, the alarm sounded. Someone triggered a sensor. The team ran out. Guards poured in from both sides. Mira shouted, "Go, I'll find Threx." She turned a corner and nearly ran into 2 raiders. They aimed their blasters, but before they could fire, Threx dropped from above, knocking them down with one mighty claw. "Let's go." Mira yelled. Together, they burst through the side wall. The rest of the team had already reached the hill. Behind them, the station lit up in flames. A wave of heat followed as the power core exploded. The night sky turned orange. The enemy had lost one of their main power stations, and the people of Garnix had gained hope. Back at camp, cheers filled the air. Children waved flags with the dragon and sun symbol. The wounded were treated. The camp had grown both in size and spirit. Bren and Fiven spoke to other camps through the radio. Messages came from far sectors. "We are ready to join. We are not afraid anymore. The girl and the beast give us strength." Mira stood on the tall stone pillar that marked the center of their home. The wind blew through her hair. Threx stood behind her like a silent guardian. She looked out at the people gathered below and spoke for the first time to the full crowd. "We're not just survivors anymore. We are defenders. We are builders. We are family." She raised her hand and pointed to the sky. "And we are not alone." Threx raised his head and let out a powerful roar, not of anger, but of pride. The people cheered. The rebellion had begun. The fires of hope were rising across Garnix, from every broken town, dusty hill, and old mining zone. People gathered, humans, aliens, young and old. Anyone who had been hurt, hunted, or forgotten now stood together under one symbol, a dragon, wing wrapped around a rising sun. And at the center of it all stood Mira, the once-caged girl who refused to kneel. Beside her stood Threx, the ancient beast who chose to rise once more. Their bond had become legend. Their courage had become a movement. But the enemy was not finished. Far above the planet, in the cold black of space, the full Raider fleet had arrived. Massive warships blocked the stars. Dozens of transport vessels landed in different regions of Garnix. Their goal was clear: destroy the camps, capture the girl, and end the rising rebellion. On the surface, the skies darkened once more, not from smoke, but from the shadow of ships. Inside the main camp, the radio buzzed. Enemy ships landing near Ridge Sector. Fires spotted in the southern valley. We're surrounded. Mira stood in the command tent with Bren, Fiven, and several camp leaders. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "This is it," she said. "They've come with everything. We're outnumbered," Bren warned. "They have tanks, drones, and full air support," Fiven added. "And we only have a few light weapons, some old tools, and hope." Mira looked at them both and smiled softly. Sometimes hope is more dangerous than any weapon. Outside, Threx stood tall, staring at the dark sky. His wings twitched slightly. He knew what was coming. He could feel the tremble of thousands of feet, machines, and ships. But he was not afraid. Mira stepped out beside him. "We don't run," she said. "We don't hide." The people of the camp gathered. Even the youngest children stood at attention. Mira raised her voice so all could hear. "They came to break us," she said. "But we are already free. They think we're weak. But today, they will see our strength." She turned to Threx. "Let's show them what happens when you try to crush the fire." The battle began at sunrise. Enemy soldiers marched across the valley toward the camp. War machines rolled behind them. Drones flew overhead. The defenders stood ready, small but determined. They had built traps, hidden weapons, and underground tunnels. But most of all, they had each other. Mira climbed onto Threx's back. The great beast spread his wings wide and roared so loud it shook the sky. The first wave of enemy troops entered the outer zone. Boom! A line of hidden charges exploded beneath their feet. Scent and smoke flew high. The raiders shouted in panic. From behind rocks and hills, Mira's people charged, fighting back with everything they had: tools, old blasters, sharpened rods, and from the sky came Threx. He flew over the battlefield like a shadow of fire. His wings cut through the air. His tail smashed the machines. His roar broke the enemy's courage. Mira held tight, shouting orders from above. She pointed out targets, helped guide survivors, and protected those who couldn't fight. But more and more enemy ships landed. One large war machine rolled toward the center of the camp, preparing to fire on the main shelter. Threx saw it. Without a second thought, he flew straight at it. The machine fired, but Threx turned midair, spinning around and shielding Mira with his massive body. The blast hit his side. He roared in pain but kept flying. He landed on the machine, crushing it with all his weight. Mira slid off his back. "Are you okay?" Threx growled low, his breathing hard, but he nodded. He was not done. The battle lasted for hours. The sky was red with smoke. Fires burned on the hills. Screams and shouts filled the air. But the people did not give up. And when the second sun of Garnix began to rise in the sky, something strange happened. The enemy began to fall back. Their commanders shouted orders, but their soldiers were tired. Many had never seen a dragon before. Fewer had ever seen a whole planet stand against them with nothing but fire in their hearts. A final group of ships tried to escape into the sky, but the people fired at them with stolen weapons. A few ships fell back to the ground, burning. Then came the silence. No more blasts, no more shouting. Just wind, fire, and the beating of wings. Mira stood in the middle of the ruined field. Her clothes were torn. Her face was covered in dust, but she was still standing. Threx landed beside her. His wings folded slowly. He was wounded. His scales cracked in places. But he stood tall. The enemy was gone. The rebellion had one. In the days that followed, survivors rebuilt their homes. Camps joined together to form the free zone of Garnix. People sang songs, shared food, and carved the symbol of the girl and the flame into stone, metal, and even trees. Mira never called herself a leader, But the people followed her anyway, and Threx. He became a guardian not just of Mira, but of anyone who needed protection. Children ran beside him. Farmers gave him fruit. Artists painted his wings in the sky. One night, under a sky full of stars, Mira sat beside Threx on a quiet hill. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" she asked. Threx was silent for a moment. Then he looked up at the stars, eyes glowing. Gently doubt if they did return, they would find something waiting for them. Not just a dragon, not just a girl, but a world that had learned to fight for each other. And so, all hell had once broken loose. But from that fire rose something greater. Hope. And a bond that would never break.